Hey everyone, Nicole, Russo, and Dan Illman welcoming you to another edition of the Oaks Countdown. We've got a lot to look back at and look ahead to, so let's get right to it by bringing you the current point standings toward the May 5th Kentucky Oaks, which is limited to a field of 14. We're in crunch time as we're into those final major preps now, and you'll immediately see some new names on this list as a result of that.
We saw two very interesting performances last week in the Fairgrounds Oaks and Bourbonnais Oaks, respectively. Southlawn and Botanical, they surged to the top of the leaderboard, along with the extremely consistent Pretty Mischievous.
And we'll take a closer look at Southlawn, the winner of the Fairgrounds Oaks. And Dan, you correctly pegged her last week as a very intriguing filly for Norm Cassie. She's won both starts this year on that long fairground stretch and beat a small but salty field in really a key race.
We often talk on the Oaks Countdown, Nicole, about whether two-year-old fillies that show a lot of potential at 2 will be able to hold their form at 3. And it's a similar situation with fillies that might be a little bit more of a late developing sort, like Southlawn. Southlawn was obviously highly regarded, as you see on your DRFPPs. She was favored in her debut against Wonder Wheel, who ended up being the champion of the crop sprinting. It took a long time for Southlawn to develop, but she's certainly developed now for Norm Cassie, pairing up Beyer speed figures in her last 2 races. Beyer speed figure tops of 86 and showing good tactical speed in the Fairgrounds Oaks. She's very likable moving forward.
Absolutely. And, I think Pretty Mischievous, who you mentioned, another filly who's pretty likable moving out of the Fairgrounds and onto Churchill Downs. She continues to be very consistent, and I think she's still a major Oaks candidate. Kind of the disappointment at the Fairgrounds this winter as we wrap up their prep season has been Hoosier Filly, who briefly led and then weakened in the Fairgrounds Oaks. As you were mentioning, some fillies step forward from 2 to 3, and she's done a little bit of the opposite, a very impressive 2-year-old filly who just kind of hasn't kept up that punch against some of these horses at 3.
That's an excellent point, Nicole. That was a disastrous performance for Hoosier Filly, who needed to show something to continue on to the Kentucky Oaks. Her first race this year, if you wanted to say, fine, she had a little bit of trouble, I could understand that, especially off of the layoff, but she didn't do a lot of running at the end of that race, even once she got clear of trouble, and she didn't do much in the Fairgrounds Oaks. Maybe she just needs a little bit of a break.
Perhaps. And as we said last week, I am very much always willing to give horses a mulligan in their first start of the season, coming off a little bit of a layoff. I think a lot of them need the race. But when you run 2 performances like this in a row, it's something of concern. Meanwhile, putting together multiple good performances in a row is another filly, Botanical, who is just rolling toward the Kentucky Oaks after winning the Bourbonnais Oaks, her second straight stakes win at Turfway after taking the Cincinnati Trophy. She's run Beyers of 91 and 90 there in her last 2 starts, as you see on the DRFPPs. And that's right up there with it, as good as anything as a 3-year-old filly has run around 2 turns this season in 2023.
You're absolutely correct. She's one of the fastest fillies in the crop right now. And even though she hasn't tried dirt yet, I'm not really that concerned. She's by the great stallion Medaglia d'Oro. Can you do any better as a sire of fillies than Medaglia d'Oro? The dam was a graded stakes winner on dirt. There is a lot of turf and distance way back in the family, but I believe she has the dirt pedigree. And again, just look at your DRFPPs. Every one of her races is a route race. Brad Cox, I'm sure, always thought this filly was stamina-based. She's put it together in her last 4 starts. Look at the versatile running style. 2 starts back, rallying from off the pace to win, and then last time out in the Bourbonnais Oaks, taking the bull by the horns and going right to the front. I'm very impressed with what I've seen thus far, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get a little bit of a price in the Kentucky Oaks because it will be her first start on dirt.
Well, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head with her pedigree, Dan. It is a versatile pedigree, as Medaglia d'Oro and Blame have both proven they can sire runners on either turf or dirt. But Medaglia d'Oro, the sire of a pair of Kentucky Oaks winners already in the great Rachel Alexandra and in Plum Pretty, a ton of stamina in the foundation on this filly. And look, when you're looking at a big barn like Brad Cox's, they're going to move fillies around a bit to get them the best opportunity to move, to earn those points, to earn their way into the big dance without taking points away from a stablemate. And we've seen that with Pretty Mischievous at the Fairgrounds, Botanical here at Turfway, and Wet Paint at Oaklawn for the Cox Barn and the Oaks division alone. So I don't think that it's, necessarily a mark down on her that she spent the winter at Turfway.
No, it's not at all. And if you look at those past performances, this filly is taking Brad to the Oaks, not the other way around. She has gone through all of her conditions. She went through a maiden race. She went through a first level allowance. She went through a little stakes. Then she went through the Oaks points race. Brad's got to be supremely confident. Check out those workouts. Of course, Mike Welsh will be all over them leading up to the Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby. They could be key pieces of information.
Well, Mike Welsh is going to be all over one of this weekend's key prep races for you. As looking ahead, we've got 2 more preps this weekend that offer 100 points to their respective winners toward the Kentucky Oaks, the Gulfstream Oaks. Make sure to check out the Clocker report from our colleague Mike Welsh and team, and the Fantasy at Oaklawn. Some fillies in both of these races who are already on the leaderboard, a big opportunity for the others to put themselves in the conversation as well. At Gulfstream, we've got a field of 8 set for the Gulfstream Oaks, led by upset Devona Dale winner Dorth Vader. Then you've got Miracle, who was second to Pretty Mischievous at the Fairgrounds last out and could flatter the form of that region.
I think you've named the top 2 contenders in this race. The question for this race is Dorth Vader for real? She pulled off that shocker at 46-1 odds in the Devona Dale. Now, looking back, maybe she shouldn't have been that price, but she was a long shot to be sure. If she can back that race up, she's an extremely strong contender. Miracle from the Todd Pletcher barn. She took on that good company at the Fairgrounds. She has excellent speed that usually plays very well going long at Gulfstream Park. And I would expect Miracle maybe to sort of stamp her way to the Kentucky Oaks with a good effort.
And again, absolutely check out those Clocker reports to see who might be sitting on a good effort coming in. Meanwhile, at Oaklawn, Wet Paint, who we just mentioned from Brad Cox's barn, will be looking for her 3rd straight stakes win at that track to go with the Martha Washington and the Honeybee. Now, I think she's got a couple of intriguing foes in this field of 10, including Grand Love by Gunrunner. I've always been impressed by this filly training, and I'm just sort of waiting for her to put it all together for a breakout performance.
And maybe Saturday is the day. She draws a very good post position. You've mentioned her pedigree. The potential is there. Wet Paint, as you mentioned, is the dominant filly right now in Arkansas. She has been very, very impressive for the aforementioned Brad Cox barn. She's facing 5 of the same horses that she just defeated last time out. Wet Paint just has to prove that she can run a little bit faster. But if you are looking for an upset, Grand Love might be the one. She does have a lot of potential.
Yeah, and as we said, both these races award 100 points to their respective winners toward the Kentucky Oaks, 40 for second, also probably enough to put you safely in the field. And with some fillies' statuses kind of up in the air, you talked about who's your filly, and perhaps they'll elect not to press on with her. Running 3rd or 4th could begin, moving you up that points list as well as people start to solidify their plans in these last 5 weeks toward the Spring Classics.
Well, these points are so important, and if you see a filly catch your eye, perhaps with a late running 2nd or 3rd in this race, they might be able to get into the Kentucky Oaks. There's going to be a lot of jostling on this leaderboard after the Gulfstream Park Oaks, after the Fantasy, of course, after the Ashland at Keeneland coming up, which will be a very important prep, and of course, there's a prep race in New York as well. So there's a lot going on in the 3-year-old filly division. We're still perhaps waiting for that breakout performance. Maybe we'll see it on Saturday.
Well, you mentioned the Ashland, and we're really looking forward to seeing champion Wonder Wheel make her 2nd start of her 3-year-old campaign in that race next week at Keeneland. We'll have the recaps of the Gulfstream Oaks and the Fantasy and the field for the Ashland and more as the Oaks countdown continues here on DRFTV.